Human trafficking, the illegal trade of human beings for the purpose of commercial sexual exploitation or forced labor. Worldwide, there are 27 million incidents of human trafficking in a year. In the United States, roughly 16,000 people are being trafficked annually. In 2011, there were 63 reported cases of individuals being trafficked in Iowa alone. The two major forms of human trafficking are sex and labor by coercion. Labor makes up 19% of all human trafficking incidents and can be found in places like sweatshops, commercial agriculture, domestic households, construction sites, and restaurants. 80% of human trafficking cases are through sexual exploitation. They often take place in massage parlors, escort services, adult bookstores, modeling studios, in bars or strip clubs. It may be in your own backyard.
Most sex trafficking is done via the internet, and the days of women and girls walking the streets are really falling by the wayside. And so there is a different approach to it, not only with awareness, but for law enforcement. It is harder to find because it's hidden on the internet. And so in getting involved with breaking traffic, I knew a lot of our efforts would be just spreading awareness that it does exist in small towns and in states like Iowa. That this is not just a foreign country crime. It's not a crime that's just happening to foreign nationals who are trafficked into our country, nor is it a crime just happening in big cities. It's happening everywhere in communities across our nation.
Do you mean in Iowa slavery is legal? The answer was yes. I went, you're kidding. I said, well, we have to do something about that. But in the back of my mind, I thought, this really isn't Iowa, we've got to prepare for this, but this is California, Arizona, Florida, Texas, New York, whatever. And as I was thinking that, he said, well, today we are prosecuting someone using the federal law in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And he looked at me and said, where are you from, Senator? And I closed my eyes when I said, Iowa.
According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 50 to 75,000 people are trafficked within the United States. Now I'm just talking about domestic human trafficking. And there's, of course, there's international and domestic. On the international side of the equation, it's estimated 25 to 35,000 people are trafficked into the United States every year. This is not necessarily the people you see crossing the border in Texas, but this is a little bit of a more sophisticated type of routing. And usually they may be coming from Europe, they may be coming from Asia, Africa, even England. What we're talking about here is domestic. And with 50 to 75,000 people being moved around the country every day, you have to stop and think of the geographics involved here. With Iowa being placed where it is, you've got Kansas City to the south, Minneapolis to the north, Chicago to the east, and Omaha to the west. You've got Interstate 80, you got Interstate 35, you got Interstate 29, you got major state highways that traverse the entire state of 20 and 30. So to say that it's not here would be kind of flying in the face of logic.
According to stripclublistings.com, there are 48 gentlemen's and strip clubs in Iowa alone.
Human trafficking is slavery. Women and children are forced into this industry at an alarming rate in our country. What other industry in our nation is run on slave labor and yet is still socially acceptable? I can't think of one. And the only way I believe that we are going to ever end human trafficking is to end demand. And to end demand for the commercial sex industry, in order to do that, we have to start changing mindsets.
How do we deal with this issue of creating a legal environment where demand is escalating, and that's why trafficking is escalating, is because there is demand, because it's highly profitable. How are we going to deal with this as a society? business people, especially businessmen, will sometimes frequent strip clubs, buy dinner for clients at strip clubs, entertain their guests at strip clubs in order to close a sale or make a deal or build, relationships or that kind of thing. And some of those expenses that are incurred are tax-deductible expenses, and we are paying for them as taxpayers. I mean, the people who are out there purchasing trafficking victims are people who are working, who have money to pay for it, who have families and wives. We are creating demand for human trafficking as a society.
Before 2006, the state of Iowa had 0 existing laws against human trafficking. Iowa in general had the attitude that it simply didn't exist in small-town Iowa.
We want to prosecute these people here. We don't want to give just to the federal government. We want to do that. I said, okay, then we got to have a law.
In 2006, Senator Maggie Tinsman drafted what is now known as Iowa Law 710A. On April 4, 2012, Governor Branstad wrote House File 2390 into Iowa law, both of which aim to protect innocent victims of human trafficking.
With House File 2390, Iowa now has the capacity to prosecute individuals as human traffickers if they exchange anything of value for sex with a child. Whereas before, according to just Iowa Code 710A, in order to be prosecuted as a human trafficker, you needed to be in collaboration with another person. So you needed to have 2 or more parties involved in commercial sexual exploitation of a child. Also with House File 2390, people who are involved in trafficking, either pimping out children or purchasing any kind of sexual activity with children, can no longer use the defense that they didn't know the person was a child in order to be protected against prosecution. So typically when someone is sex trafficked, they get a fake ID if they're underage. But a person can't say, well, they had an ID that said they were 21. That's no longer viable. And also, people who are prosecuted for the human trafficking of children in our state now must register as sex offenders.
The way information is generally recorded by law enforcement in Iowa is that officers make a report. Those reports are compiled. They go into a statistical database that's maintained by the state. It categorizes the types of crimes that are being committed out there. One of the problems that we have when it comes to human trafficking is the system wasn't designed to capture those kinds of statistics. And so what might be a human trafficking case is oftentimes simply charged as a prostitution case or a harassment case or something like that. And so the consequence of that lack of clarity is our statistics are pretty murky in terms of what's actually happening in Iowa. Now, the Human Trafficking Enforcement and Prosecution Initiative that is out of the Attorney General's office is working on that process. That's one of the things that we identified as a problem, one of the things that we want to correct by clarifying, redefining the numbers in such a way as that we capture the true identity of human trafficking here in Iowa. There are some advantages to being able to arrest them, as in Brittany Phillips' case. She was arrested, charged with prostitution, which allowed the police then to take her out of the area and away from the traffickers, and she was able to tell her story. And luckily, the Chicago Police Department did a really fine job with that case. And ultimately, what happened before she left, the Illinois State's Attorney dropped the charges against her. And that's kind of part of the debate is do we keep charging them or don't we? Because sometimes, from a tactical advantage, from a tactical viewpoint, it is an advantage to have that there.
In the state of Iowa, when a new officer is hired, they go to the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy and they receive the training as part of their basic training at the ILEA. A couple of years ago, to train all of the officers of the Waterloo Police Department, we had special training set aside for the officers to be able to look for and recognize signs of human trafficking.
Check out what is being done in your area. Raise awareness and inform your legislator that you do care. The Waterloo Police have taken the first step. Now so should you.
What we want to do is educate our kids not only about sex trafficking and what's going on in our nation so that they can better protect themselves or intervene if they know of another student who might be in trouble, but to start getting them to think about the other side, and so that we can change that mindset. And I always say to kids, you have a choice. No one can make that choice for you. You have to make the choice. Do you want to choose to be part of the demand for an industry that is run on slave labor? Or do you want to be part of the collective voice of people who say that our country there's no place for slavery in our country? It's their choice. But how do you make a choice if you don't see the other side of the story?
Make the choice today to be an active part in putting an end to modern-day slavery. For more information, visit www.breakingtraffic.org or find Iowa statistics on the Polaris Project. Also, don't forget to check out our website, www.empirerisesfilm.com.